The Mad Titan Thanos is one of the most iconic villains in all of Marvel Comics, but if you're only really familiar with him from his depiction in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, then you might be surprised to know that he's actually a try-hard nice guy that does pretty much all of his evil deeds solely just to impress this hot skeleton girl. But honestly though, mood. So who is this lady? Well, technically, she's not a woman at all, but just frequently appears in this female form. This is Death. She's an abstract, which is a non-physical being that is the embodiment of a concept. Marvel has a lot of these, and Death is obviously the embodiment of, well, death. Before we can really talk about her though, it's worth noting that the character of Thanos has the concept of death baked right into his creative DNA, as he's named after Thanatos, the Greek god of death. Specifically though, Thanos is based on a theory of psychology that delves into the relationship between love and death. And no, this isn't just me overanalyzing a comic book, since his creator, Jim Starlin, has gone on record to explain how this inspiration struck him while taking psychology classes. Now, don't worry, we are going to get into the crazy comic book nonsense later in the video, but the deeper origin behind Thanos is super interesting and helps set the stage for how he and his relationship to Mistress Death has evolved over time. But to hold you guys over, here's this sexy photo of Death. We good? Good. Starlin was inspired by the Thanatos-Eros concept of Freudian theory. Hypersimplified, Dr. Sigmund Freud believed that there are two forces that drive people forward in life. There's Eros, which is sexual instinct, and Thanatos, a death instinct. Even before he started working at Marvel, Starlin had really loved this particular concept, and kicked around a couple of characters based on it in his head. There's Eros, aka Star Fox, who has the ability to stimulate the pleasure sensors in the brains of people around him, and his brother Thanos, a being of pure death and destruction. When writing for Iron Man number 55 in 1973, Starlin finally had the opportunity to bring these characters to life. Despite the thought that went into these characters though, it didn't exactly translate onto the page at first. Eros didn't do anything in the story, simply appearing one time in a flashback, and Thanos himself wasn't much more than a generic space bad guy for Iron Man to defeat with the help of another new character that was introduced in this issue named Drax the Destroyer. Yes, this is the very same Drax that was made popular in Guardians of the Galaxy, and back in the day, he was very, very different. Later that year though, Thanos would appear in Starlin's Captain Marvel series, where his motives were expanded upon. Specifically, he was trying to get his hands on the Cosmic Cube in order to get god-level powers in service of death. This certainly gave Thanos a little bit more depth as a character, but later in the storyline, it was revealed that the motivation behind pleasing Death was much more than just a simple quest for power. Rather, it was love. And in a surprise twist, it's revealed that Death is an absolute babe. Now, the character of Death had been around Marvel Comics prior to this storyline, but she was treated less like a specific character and more like its place in traditional folklore. You know, the kind of vague being from a higher dimension that could be used in a variety of ways. And considering that these early books weren't the most keen on continuity, her depiction similarly wasn't consistent. However, as with many appearances in pop culture, Death back then was typically portrayed as a man or as a genderless skeleton creature. Now, I could totally be wrong because these old comics can be really hard to find scans of, but I think that this appearance with Thanos was the first time that Death had been portrayed as a woman in the Marvel Comics, which is why this reveal had so much power. In an interview with the LA Times, Starlin said that his memory from back then was a bit hazy since he had just returned home from service, but he speculates that Thanos literally courting Death most likely came from the death wish that Starlin himself was entertaining back then. Jesus! That being said though, this does nicely tie in with Freud's Thanatos theory, where he proposed in his essay Beyond the Pleasure Principle that the goal of all life is death. Okay, with all of that out of the way helping cement the motivation and philosophy of Thanos, let's talk about how that worked out for him in the comics. For the longest time, Thanos' utter obsession with death was never really explained. I mean, sure, we got glimpses of it on occasion, but it was finally delved into in greater detail in 2013. And it's, interesting. So with this new origin story, Thanos was never a violent or angry kid. I mean, sure, he was a little bit of an outcast because of a genetic abnormality that gave him purple skin, but Thanos was absolutely brilliant and was still able to make friends. However, this simply wouldn't do, because from his very birth, Thanos was marked by death to be her instrument of destruction. To help egg him on, she appeared to the young Titan and encouraged him to visit a cave with some of his classmates. While exploring though, there was a cave-in and they were trapped for 3 days. While Thanos was able to survive, his peers were eaten by lizards. This was absolutely tragic, and the rest of his classmates were convinced that this was all Thanos' doing, making him a true outcast. In this isolation, Death appeared once again and encouraged him to take revenge by slaughtering the entire nest of lizards. Previously, he was too skittish to even dissect a dead one in science class, and this act of pure rage gave birth to a monster, all according to Death's plans. As he grew older, Death encouraged Thanos to kill and dissect more and more, increasing the size and intelligence of his prey. For Thanos, this was all in the name of science, but it can't be denied that he was also trying to impress Death, who he was falling in love with, especially since she was the only person that he had any kind of meaningful contact with. Eventually, Thanos tried making a move on his crush, but was rejected hard, and it was this, combined with needing to flee after killing his own mother, that Thanos left home. He didn't see Death for years, but made up for his loneliness by banging his way across the galaxy, taking on dozens and dozens of partners and siring lots and lots of children. When he finally returns home, Thanos sees Death for the first time in years, and his feelings never wavered. She continued to give Thanos that little rope of hope, saying that she would be with him if he killed off all of his mates and children, and he happily obliges. But of course, that wasn't enough, and she now wanted him to commit genocide on a much larger scale, leading him to raise countless worlds, including his former home. Only after this did he get a single kiss from Death and nothing more. Even then though, this kiss would just be a tool to further string Thanos along, with her now saying that in order to become her lover, Thanos must become a god. This brings us back around to his initial storyline where Thanos got his hands on the Cosmic Cube. With his insane new power, Thanos plowed through the Avengers, transcended his mortal body, and attained something close to godhood. And yet, Death was unimpressed. She just sat around watching expressionless and without saying a word. Literally whatever she wanted, Thanos was happy to promise, even the entire universe. Yet, she still didn't seem to care in the slightest. In his transcendent state, Thanos left the Cosmic Cube unguarded, and Captain Marvel was able to risk his life in order to destroy it, completely defeating the Mad Titan. In response, Death finally emotes by laughing her ass off. Real talk, this is a super accurate portrayal of those kinds of toxic girls that string guys along for fun. In the Marvel Universe, things with Thanos kind of went on the back burner for a while, since he only had a couple of minor storylines before being killed off in 1977. But he was brought back 13 years later for his most iconic storyline of all time, Infinity Gauntlet. In preparation for the storyline, Death resurrects Thanos, as she believes that there is a cosmic imbalance in the universe, since there were currently more sentient beings alive than had ever died. In order to bring things back to equilibrium, Death wants Thanos to wipe out half of all sentient life in the universe. A task this big was going to require a lot of firepower, but Thanos, not being one to turn down an opportunity to impress this chick, hunted down the 6 Infinity Gems from all corners of the universe, taking them from some pretty damn powerful beings. With the gauntlet fully assembled, Thanos once again achieved godlike power, but this time it was on an unprecedented scale. Even the freaking devil was humbling himself around Thanos, just waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike and steal the gauntlet for himself. In many aspects, the Infinity Gauntlet storyline was just a grander retelling of that original Thanos storyline with the Cosmic Cube, and you'll notice several of the same story beats being hit on once again. This time, however, the Purple Man is way more over the top in his utter obsession with Mistress Death. He's constantly spouting lines that would feel right at home on a 13-year-old's social media, like, "She is the keeper of my heart, my love is worship, and Death should be revered, shrines should be built to her." Even with the power of the gems, Death was still not impressed, and no display of his might seemed to be doing anything for her. He builds her a shrine, he tortures his brother, he summons his daughter Nebula and uses her as a morbid tribute to Death as he leaves her brutalized in a limbo state between life and death. He even writes his name in space by moving entire freaking planets. Yet, once again, there was nothing that Thanos could possibly do that would even remotely impress Mistress Death. And honestly, at this point, it seems like she just wants him to leave her alone. Of course, it took Thanos a little while to realize that while he was busy playing with his gauntlet like a child with a new toy, he had completely forgotten to accomplish the task that he was resurrected for in the first place. But with a snap of his fingers, half of all sentient life in the universe was erased in an instant. But would this unprecedented genocide that Death specifically wanted him to do impress her though? Of course not. Dude, this pissed off Thanos so freaking much, and he threw a total hissy fit. Because yeah, that's attractive. He even tried to make Death jealous by using the gauntlet to create his own girlfriend that was basically just a sexy female Thanos. It's kind of ridiculous. As he gets more skilled with his newfound power, Thanos only grows more and more obnoxious. It doesn't help that literally nobody is able to even remotely stop him, including powerful cosmic entities. I mean, hell, Death herself was getting tired of Thanos' crap and stepped into the fight as well to no avail. Like with the Cosmic Cube, Thanos transcended his mortal body into a cosmic form, and was defeated because he left the source of his power unguarded. Now defeated, Thanos would try to live a peaceful life as a farmer. However, chaos and destruction would always rope him back in, because even after his colossal failures and with Death herself betraying him, Thanos was still super into her. Even during his brief stint as a good guy where he tried to make amends for all of the pain and suffering that he caused, Death came right on back to tempt him back into service, in the form of a child, for some reason. Now, shifting gears a bit, Mistress Death also had a fling with Deadpool, but much like with Thanos, she was a massive tease. Though in Wade's case, the two of them actually seemed to get along quite a bit. Of course, this made Thanos insanely jealous, so he hired a mercenary to use a magic rock to divide Deadpool into separate personalities that would be killed off one by one, all for the express purpose of making Deadpool less attractive to Death. Because comics. Obviously, this ends up not working out, so instead, Thanos literally curses Deadpool with eternal life so that he could never be with his crush. Even Thanos' son Thane wasn't immune to Death pulling his strings. This led to a massive conflict with his father. However, when Thanos was able to finally defeat his son, Death went right on back to trying to get him back on her hook. But this very transparent manipulation was the final straw for the Mad Titan to finally be over her. Well, that is until the immediate next storyline, which was all about an older Thanos bringing his younger self into the future for the sole purpose of suicide via past self, so that this older Thanos could finally enjoy the sweet embrace of death. And I hope that made sense because time travel storylines are really weird to explain sometimes. Naturally, old Thanos built a statue to Death and even killed every sentient being in the universe for her, which proves that up until the very end, Thanos is just going to be strung along by his cruel mistress. Now, the good news is that the younger Thanos thought that his older self's obsession was pathetic, and he went back to his original time in order to deviate from this path, and thus erase this future timeline's existence. But given the character's track record, I'm sure it won't be long before the Mad Titan starts trying to jump Death's bones once again. I mean, his rebound relationship was with Hela, the goddess of death, so he doesn't seem to be too over her considering that he has a type. But no matter when Thanos eventually relapses, we can tell by her previous actions and from this interaction in the Scarlet Spider series that Death is never, ever going to be interested in him. It's truly insane that despite being one of the most powerful and prolific villains in the Marvel Universe, Thanos is just a pathetic dude that's thirsting after a hot skeleton girl. That's why I am not surprised in the slightest that his motivation ended up getting so heavily altered in the MCU. I'm sure that I'm not alone in thinking that despite being a cosmic level juggernaut, I just have the hardest time taking this guy seriously. This guy, on the other hand, yeah, that makes a bit more sense. At the same time though, I kind of feel bad for the guy. I mean, we've all had unrequited crushes, and personally, especially in my younger years, I've been that kind of overcompensating nice guy who tried to desperately impress girls that didn't give a single fuck about me. Besides, all things must eventually die, so what good is killing a bunch of people going to do to appease Death in the first place? She's a cosmic entity that experiences time in a very different way from mere mortals. She has the patience to just wait things out and let beings come to an end naturally. She even points this out to Thanos during one of her talks, stating that it never even occurred to him that she doesn't need killings. However, causing death seems to be the only thing that Thanos can even comprehend doing, and if that doesn't get him what he wants, then he's without purpose. Thanos, my dude, it's time to move on. The ending of his conflict with Thane, where he's finally done with Mistress Death, was a good step forward in character development, in my opinion. Yes, his motivation to court a cosmic entity was novel at first, but I think it's really gone overboard at this point, and bringing him right on back to the status quo won't make him any more interesting. Marvel, please, please, please let this dude be his own man. He has been through enough. I honestly thought this video was just going to be like a comprehensive look of Thanos trying to bone this skeleton girl, but I wasn't expecting to get into like Freudian theory, so that was like a fun rabbit hole that I don't know, I like when these videos do that. So hopefully you learned at least a little something new, and if you like this, maybe like watch another video on the channel. Like and subscribe too. It's been a really hard month on YouTube, and I could really use it, so please. Yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and maybe I'll see you next time.